Imagine a loving, devoted daughter transforming into one of the most elusive bank robbers of her time. This is the story of Peggy Jo Tallis. Peggy Jo Tallis was the epitome of a good-hearted Texas woman, caring for her ailing mother every single day. But on a fateful morning in May 1991, Peggy Jo decided to wear something different: men's clothes, a fake beard, and a cowboy hat. She drove her 1975 Pontiac Grand Prix to the American Federal Bank in Irving, Texas, and handed a note to the teller. "This is a bank robbery." Unlike typical bank robbers, Peggy Jo was calm and collected, never carrying a weapon, and always working alone. Her niece, Michelle, couldn't believe it. "My Aunt Peggy was the last person on earth you would ever imagine robbing a bank." Peggy Jo didn't just rob one bank, she robbed many, becoming a modern-day Bonnie without a Clyde. She was a master of disguise, fooling law enforcement officials who had no idea they were chasing a woman. In 1992, the FBI finally cornered Peggy Jo near her apartment, assuming they would never deal with her again. She pleaded guilty and went to prison for almost 3 years, seemingly putting her bank robbing days behind her. But in May, years later, a small bank in Tyler, Texas, was robbed by a 60-year-old woman dressed in black. Peggy Jo had returned, and her story was far from over. Growing up in the mid-50s, Peggy Jo was a free-spirited teenager, always ready for an adventure. She dropped out of high school, drove to San Francisco, and embraced the beat poetry scene. In her 20s, she worked as a receptionist and lived a wild, carefree life, always seeking excitement. She loved the movie, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, identifying with the outlaws who never hurt innocent bystanders. Despite her wild side, Peggy Jo was a loving aunt, making up funny games and telling ghost stories to her nieces and nephews. Her life took a turn when she fell in love with a man who turned out to be married, leaving her heartbroken. She moved in with her mother, who was battling a degenerative bone disease, and took on various jobs to make ends meet. By 1984, Peggy Jo was 40, feeling like her life was slipping away, and longing for the wildness she once had. In May 1991, she walked into American Federal Bank, her heart racing, but she remained calm and collected. She became known as Cowboy Bob, a professional bank robber who always outsmarted the FBI. In 1992, she was finally caught, but her story didn't end there. Years later, she bought an RV and planned to live on the beach in Mexico, embracing her dream of freedom. She sold her belongings, said goodbye to her friends, and hit the road, living life on her own terms. In October 2004, she robbed another bank in Tyler, Texas, this time dressed as an older man. The FBI never suspected her, and she continued to live her life, calling her family from payphones to say she was fine. In May, Peggy Jo robbed another bank, but this time, a dye pack exploded, drawing attention to her. A chase ensued, and she was cornered by police in a quiet subdivision. Holding a toy pistol, she stepped out of her RV, telling the officers, "You're going to have to kill me." The officers fired, and Peggy Jo fell, her life ending as dramatically as it had been lived. Peggy Jo Tallis, a loving daughter, a free spirit, and an unforgettable outlaw. Good for you, my sweet Peg. Good for you.